that, I will hand it over to you, John and Lydia.
Thank you. I'm John Sweet. I'm a staff attorney at the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. We are a statewide legal aid network that, we're a statewide specialized legal aid program that's part of the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network. We focus on low-income residential utility cases, helping clients connect to and maintain affordable utility service. We represent low-income residential utility consumers statewide. We offer training, technical assistance, and support to legal aid and community groups across Pennsylvania. I'm going to hand it off to Lydia to tell you a little bit.
Thanks, John. My name is Lydia Gottesfeld. I'm an attorney at Community Legal Services. I'm in the Public Benefits Unit at CLS, along with the Energy Unit at CLS. And the Public Benefits Unit represents low-income folks here in Philadelphia in public benefits appeals, including LIHEAP appeals and LIHEAP cases. And the Energy Unit works with low-income folks here in Philadelphia with a variety of utility problems. And so we also do some systemic work with utilities and are part of the LIHEAP Advisory Committee as well.
Thank you. And so I'm going to begin with the basics. I'll be talking about the program benefits, eligibility, and how to apply. And then I'm going to hand it off to Lydia to discuss some of the more complex issues as well as the appeals process. So starting with the basics about the low-income energy assistance program. This is a federally funded program. It's administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, and it helps low-income consumers afford their heat during the winter. You can apply through Compass online, or you can apply in person at the local county assistance office. There's a link to Compass in the presentation. So there's 3 components to the program. The first is a cash grant. That's a set amount towards a heating bill. It's based on a variety of factors, including income, location, and the type of heat of the applicant. There's also a crisis grant component, which is between $25 and $600 to resolve a home heating crisis. And it must be sufficient to resolve the crisis alone or in combination with hardship funds or other grants. And then the third portion is the Crisis Interface Program, which is a program that helps applicants deal with repair or replace home heating systems that are broken, either inoperable or insufficient. Programs open from November 1st to November 10th. If you received LIHEAP last year, you could have applied earlier, although at this point it's November 1st, so LIHEAP season is officially open. But don't be surprised if you run into someone that says that they already applied. As I said already, you can apply in person or at your local county assistance office. And they have a mobile-friendly site for the Compass. A little bit about processing time. For cash grants, the processing time is 30 days from the date of completed application. Crisis grants can take up to 10 days or before the loss of heat, whichever is going to be sooner. However, if the household is without heat or is going to lose heat within 48 hours, then there's a 48-hour limit. And there's also an 18-hour limit for households that are without heat or are going to lose heat within 48 hours, and if there's a life-threatening situation. On to more specifics about the cash grant portion. Eligibility for a cash grant is 150% of the federal poverty level or less, and it's based on the household income, which means the gross income of all household members. It's calculated either by month by the based on the income earned in the month previous to the application, which they will multiply by 12, or a full year of actual income, and they'll use whichever is more beneficial. However, you may need to specify if you're requesting the full year actual income calculation. So what counts as income? Employment earnings, profit from self-employment, also income, rental income from roomers, boarders, apartment renters, and unearned income, which can include support payments or utility allowances that are paid directly to the customer. That would be someone living in public housing who gets the utility allowance paid directly to them. What's not included is any type of educational assistance, temporary census income, food stamps, earned income tax credits, or tax rebates, wages and earnings from dependent children, and Medicare premiums that are deducted from Social Security benefits. Eligibility, the second prong is you must have a home heating responsibility, which means you have to be responsible, demonstrate you're responsible for the payment of the primary heating source, either directly or through rent. If your heat is paid indirectly through rent, you get directly through rent, you get only 50% of the grant paid to customer. You may also choose to apply the grant to a secondary heat source, but only if it's necessary for the operation of the primary heat source. So this is in situations where you have maybe steam heat, where water service is necessary for the operation of the steamed radiator heat, or for gas or oil furnaces that require electric to operate. You can also get the cash grant for supplemental heating source, which would be a source that the household uses in addition to the primary source of heat. However, in order to use a cash or a crisis grant for a supplemental heating source, the primary heating source must be inoperable. And finally, the third prong of eligibility is that you must be a Pennsylvania resident. It doesn't matter how long you lived in Pennsylvania, just that you intend to stay. College students may be eligible if they live in an apartment during the school year, if they change their address, if they change their domicile to Pennsylvania. And also persons living in RVs and campers are eligible, but they have to demonstrate that the RV or camper is permanently located in Pennsylvania and that they do not have a permanent residence. And in order to receive a cash grant, you do not have to have a pending termination, an outstanding bill or debt to the utility, and you also do not have to have a direct relationship to the utility or vendor. If you have one of those situations, you may also be entitled to a crisis grant. So the crisis grant is a second type of grant. You can get both. However, in order to get the crisis grant, you have to have a actual or imminent home heating emergency that can be resolved with the grant. So it'd be up to $600, and it has to be enough to stop, basically either stop the termination in combination with either the cash grant or with possibly a hardship fund from the utility, or with a customer payment. Other than that, the eligibility requirements are similar to those of the cash grant. The Crisis Interface Program is the third aspect of LIHEAP, and this is assistance to help households repair or replace inoperable or inadequate heating systems. It has the same duration of the LIHEAP year. DHS will refer the applicants to a local weatherization office who will connect them with a provider to provide the repairs. They'll conduct a home visit and perform the remediation. And it has the same timeline as the crisis grant, which is 48 hours or 18 hours in the case of a life-threatening situation. The things that they may come and do include repairing the heating system, loaning an auxiliary heater, repairing gas or fuel lines, replace unrepairable heating systems, meaning they will come and give you a new heating system. However, they'll only do it if the original heating system cannot be repaired or if it can only be repaired temporarily. They'll also repair hot water hot water heater if it's directly necessary for the operation of the heating system. They'll provide pipe thawing services, and they will repair broken windows, but only if they're also repairing the heating system. And they may also provide blankets. Eligibility for the Crisis Interface Program is similar to the grant programs. It's 150% of federal poverty level or below, must have a home heating responsibility, Pennsylvania residency. And the heating system must have been operable when you moved in and must have been operable within the last 2 years. And they also need landlord permission and agreement not to evict the resident for 18 months or more in the case of a tenant. And with that, I will hand off to Lydia to discuss some of the more complex LIHEAP issues that may arise.
Thanks, John. Sorry, I'm just getting my screen up and running. Oh boy.
Actually, while you do that, Lydia, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first of the polls for CLE credits. Attorneys who are requesting CLE credits for this webinar, please answer the question on your screen now, and once you answer, the box will disappear. Anyone else is welcome to answer. We like to know that you're paying attention, but you won't get any credits. Is this the issue with the multiple screens, Lydia?
Yeah, sorry. Remember what I had to press? I don't. Oh, here we go. Oh, no. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So everyone, the poll for CLE credits will stay up for 2 minutes, and attorneys requesting credits, you must respond to this first poll and the second one in order to receive the credit. And we're just waiting on Lydia.
Did that work?
No, it's still on the same.
Oh, I thought that was gonna work. Sorry.
Okay, you've got it now.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
You're welcome to go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about some special LIHEAP issues. I did just want to make one note on John's presentation that's really relevant for Philadelphia folks. I know there are some Philadelphia folks on the call. Utilities sometimes accept, and this is the case in Philly, crisis grants to resolve crises even though they're asking the customer for more than the amount of what the crisis grant would be. So in Philadelphia, PICO has a policy of accepting crisis grants to resolve the crisis if the total bill is $3,000 and below, and PGW has the same policy for $2,500. So I just wanted to flag that even folks who may need more than $600 or $800 to resolve a crisis could potentially use crisis to could potentially access crisis, and that may be the case on other utilities across the state. I'm not sure. You'll have to check in with Pulp on that. To get to our special LIHEAP issues, so we're going to talk about a few issues that can be tricky. The first one we're going to discuss was flagged earlier by John. It's tenant eligibility for households whose heat is included in rent. So when tenants pay an undesignated portion of their rent to heat, they can still get LIHEAP, which is really great. So even though they may not have a heating bill, if they can show that they do pay heat as part of rent, they meet the requirement that they must have a heating responsibility. The cash grant is only going to be 50% of what they would get of a full cash grant. And there is one exception, that tenants who are living in public housing where rent is based on percentage of income and heat is included in that, those folks are not eligible. Okay, and so there's also certain situations where the LIHEAP grant is going to be paid directly to the applicant as opposed as being paid to the vendor. One of those situations is the one we just discussed, where tenants pay for heat as a part of rent, do not have a direct bill. They can get a cash grant that's 50% of what it would be, and that would be paid in most instances directly to them. Other instances are when a fuel vendor does not participate in the program, when the heating bill is in the name of a non-household member, the welfare office will accept the applicant as having a heating responsibility if they can show, through any means that they can, right? Whether it's the check they write to the utility or show that they are actually paying the bill, even though it's in the name of the non-household member. And certainly a letter from that person might also be a helpful verification piece there. They would get the LIHEAP grant directly to them. And then the other situations are when there's the bill is paid to a third party, such as a master metering situation, or when the applicant is a roomer. But typically, the grants go directly to the vendor. So another tricky issue is that when an adult in the household may not qualify for LIHEAP, usually due to immigration status, which we have not discussed yet and we'll discuss later, but children are eligible, then the household can get a LIHEAP grant. So if you have an ineligible adult and an eligible child, this happens a lot. Mixed status families where you might have adults in the household who are non-citizens that don't qualify, and citizen children. That household can still apply for LIHEAP. The adult income does count, but they are not counted toward the household. So this policy sort of falsely shrinks household size and inflates income, but these households can and should apply for LIHEAP. We'll talk more about immigration status in a little bit. Fees and deposits. So LIHEAP can be used to pay for fees, for late fees and pre-connection fees, but not security deposits. This is another issue which can come up for somebody who is applying for LIHEAP to help establish service at a new address. and they have a balance from an old address, a LIHEAP grant can only be used to pay for up to 50% of the prior balance. So if you have a large prior balance and 50%, or if you have a small prior balance, sorry, your cash grant can only pay for 50% of that. The rest of the cash grant would just go towards future bills. So the winter moratorium, as most of you probably know, in Pennsylvania, there's a moratorium on utility shut-offs from December 1st through March 31st for households with income below 250% of the federal poverty level. This is a great thing, but what it means is that low-income folks really shouldn't be getting shut off from December through March. So they can't get crisis during the moratorium, is basically what that means. Unless there has been special PUC approval to terminate, termination notices during that time are not going to prove the crisis element of the application. So the really heavy periods for getting crisis are in November, right now, starting today, very exciting. And then again, starting in February. And the reason starting in February is because DHS has created a policy where they will credit crisis or termination notices dated February 1st or later for shutoffs dated April 1st or later, so that people who are really at threat of being shut off after the moratorium can go ahead, use their shutoff notice, and access crisis before, you know, the very last day of the moratorium. So that's a really good program, and folks who are getting termination notices, even if you know, well, you don't have to worry about that because you can't be shut off until April. No, you should really use that shut-off notice, go in, get the crisis, and make sure the client's not going to, you know, be in a bad place in April. So I mentioned immigration status. So LIHEAP is available to certain lawfully admitted non-citizens, regardless of when they arrived in the United States. So what that means is the folks who are eligible for LIHEAP, which is persons who have qualified immigration status, the main ones listed on this screen: lawful permanent residents, asylees, refugees, Cuban Haitian entrants, and certain non-citizens who've been battered or subject to extreme cruelty. Those people and a few others can access LIHEAP even though they're not a citizen. And there is no 5-year bar. For those of you who work with other benefits programs, you know that for federal Medicaid and food stamps, some of these populations have to wait 5 years. Not the case for LIHEAP. So we'd really encourage those immigrant populations to apply. And another note on this page, again, going back to households where some members may be eligible and others may not be, the household could potentially still access LIHEAP if they meet all the other eligibility qualifications. But under the rules, unfortunately, the household size is warped because the folks who are ineligible, their income would be counted, but they are not counted in the household size. So 2 adults who don't qualify, both working, and 2 kids who are citizens, the household can apply, but all the income would be counted, and it would just be a household of 2, rather than what it really is, which is a household of 4. And that's an area that we're working to have some movement on. So, and then just a note that if it is a household where the adult is not eligible, and they can still apply for the household, and they do not have to give any sort of social security number or immigration status. LIHEAP, Heat and Eat. So this is a program that the Department of Human Services runs, which is a really fantastic program whereby DHS actually issues all SNAP recipients, all SNAP households, a small LIHEAP grant at the beginning of the season. And what this does, it enables DHS to give all SNAP households the maximum SNAP standard utility allowance. And so this is really a rule, although it uses LIHEAP dollars to effectuate the program that really affects folks' food stamps, but it's really important because it allows DHS to just say that these people who have a heating responsibility are using this full standard utility allowance, which in Pennsylvania this year is going to be $594, and that increases their food stamps grant. And I did want to just note here that there is some policy change potentially coming down the pike related to Heat and Eat. The federal administration has proposed a rule that would potentially lower what Pennsylvania could do for the standard utility allowance, and what that would do, although it wouldn't affect LIHEAP so much, I'm mentioning it here because we're discussing it, it would potentially, decrease Pennsylvania food stamps households food stamp grants by an average of $40 a month. And I just wanted to flag that because I know that there's a webinar coming up on November 7th with Louise Hayes from my office and Kathy Fisher from the Hunger Coalition about that issue. So you can reach out to me if you want more information. I'm next going to talk about the appeals process. So how does DHS make these determinations? John talked a little bit about this. For cash grants, they have to provide a written determination within 30 days of receiving the application. They also have to provide notice within 10 days if there's anything missing from the application with an opportunity to respond. And for crisis grants, those timelines are shorter. As John mentioned, the rules say that for crisis grants, they must be processed within 48 hours. DHS does have a policy that says they are taking up to 10 days, depending on when the shut-off notice is actually for. So crisis grants, there's less time. So those are the timelines you're working with. And if you get an adverse decision, as with other public benefits, the applicant can file an appeal. The appeal deadline is within 30 days of the date on the notice, but a person could also appeal if they think their grant amount isn't right, or if there's a delay in crisis application processing. Mainly, we're seeing appeals for LIHEAP denial. We really encourage folks to file appeals if they get a denial. The county assistance offices are supposed to work with individuals who are appealing to settle the appeal. So filing an appeal doesn't mean that the client is going to be at a hearing in front of an ALJ. If the person was denied for failing to prove their heating responsibility or their household size, they can file an appeal and submit that proof with their appeal, and they should be able to work with the county assistance office to get that resolved. And we really recommend appealing because you preserve your rights in that instance, especially if it's an end of season denial, so that you can keep working with the county assistance office to resolve the issue. In some instances, it might make more sense to actually not appeal, but rather to reapply. One of the main times that you might want to advise somebody to reapply is if they are actually over income at the time of their application and they get denied for being over income, but then their income changes. So as John discussed earlier, the way that they look at income is they look at the month before the month that you applied. So if I apply in November, they're looking at October's income, or you can ask them to look at a 12-month annualized income if that's better. But oftentimes I see clients who say, well, this, you know, I had to use my income from last month, but I'm just really not making that much this month. You know, they can wait 2 weeks and apply in December and use November's income and be approved for LIHEAP. So that's definitely one instance where you might want to reapply. And for some folks, it might just be easier for them to go in and reapply. LIHEAP does have a rule that, along with other public benefits, that DHS is supposed to consider a new application as a request for reconsideration if it's submitted for LIHEAP within 60 days of the date of the first application. So this rule is a little less helpful for LIHEAP than it is for other benefits, but if the person doesn't want to file an appeal for some reason, they can request that their application be reconsidered and submit whatever documentation was missing. But again, we really urge folks to file appeals because you preserve your rights in that case, and also you give the local offices some impetus to resolve your issue in a timely manner. How to appeal. So as you all know, notices will come with an appeal form on the back, one of the last pages in the notice. So folks can fill out that appeal form and just submit it. If you didn't, if they didn't get a notice and they're just appealing that their LIHEAP was delayed or something like that, they can ask for a blank form, or that, you know, if that doesn't work out for somebody, you know, they really should accept any request in writing. So they can just write down on a piece of paper, this is what I'm appealing, this is the date, and keep a copy, as we advise everybody to do with any paperwork they're submitting to the county assistant's office. And if handed in person is probably the best idea. If you're going to mail it certified. We really don't recommend people mailing things without some sort of proof. And always get a receipt if you are handing it in person, so that when you follow up and say what's going on with my appeal, or you have your pre-hearing conference, you know, you can make sure you have proof that you submitted it.
Lydia, before you move on to the next slide, we have two questions.
Sure.
The first one is, does someone apply for heat? Does someone apply for something, eat and heat, or does it come automatically?
So Heat and Eat comes automatically. It is a small grant that is put onto people's access cards who are already getting food stamps. And most people don't know it's there. The point of it is to increase your monthly food stamps grant. You don't have to apply for it. The reason that they do it is that they give it to everybody so that they can assume that everybody has this, so that they can assume a standard utility allowance, which will increase the food stamps grant. So nobody has to apply for it.
Okay, and the second question is there a program that will allow a victim in a domestic violence situation start with a clean slate if they're forced to flee their home, but the utilities are in their name and they do not have any money?
Start with it. So is there I'm making sure I hear this program, the utilities are in the victim's name? Is that?
Yes, and they're forced to flee their home in a domestic violence situation.
Yeah, so there are rules, and Pope can chime in on this if you want, but there are rules that allow victims of domestic violence to have special rules working with the utilities in getting special access to payment arrangements. They won't necessarily get a clean slate, but they will get access to arrangements that other people wouldn't get. So if they have to flee, the utilities are in their name and there's big balances, there's definitely a special resource where they can get agreements so that they're not prohibited from leaving and getting service somewhere else due to those balances, but the balances themselves wouldn't necessarily be completely wiped away. I don't know if, I know Pope does a lot of work on this too. I don't know if, John, you want to respond to that as well, or?
So the only thing I would have to add is, so if the person that they're fleeing from was the primary wage earner, then and they're now they don't have any money that they're moving out, they might be able to enroll at CAP. And I would just encourage Deb, if you are dealing with a situation like this, you can reach out to us. The Pulp's contact information is going to come up on the last slide, and you can reach out to us directly for some guidance on that case.
Yeah, great. Okay. So, but absolutely, I'm really glad that you asked that question because while not related to LIHEAP directly, there are special protections for victims of domestic violence, and the Public Utility Commission has recognized that those folks should have access to special protections. So I think that's it related to appeals. We have some resources listed here, and I just wanted to mention we have the Department of Human Services LIHEAP page, and on this page you can find the Pennsylvania LIHEAP State Plan, which is a really helpful resource, but you can also see income limits. The DHS LIHEAP handbook is like the other public benefits programs have handbooks, is the sub-regulatory guidance that the state uses to implement the program. So it's really easy to use, and we have the link there for it. And so when you have LIHEAP questions, of course, you can reach out to PULP or CLS, but the handbook is also a really good place to go to find answers. And then the PULP LIHEAP Advocates Manual, which they do every year, a really useful tool, which is coming in early November. And I think that's it. So we have time for more questions. If anybody has them, as John mentioned, our contact information is here if folks have questions during the season as well.
So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box right now so we can get your answers for you. In the meantime, I'm going to launch the second poll for the attorneys requesting CLE credits for participation in the webinar. Please answer either yes or no. They will both qualify you to receive the credit. And we will give you a little bit to see if any questions come in, because we're running a little short right now.
And this is John. I'll just add that the Pulp's Advocates Manuals in the final stages of finalization. We're going to be sending it around next week.
Anybody have any questions? I can't believe there's none. Okay, well, I think then we are going to end a bit early, unless John or Lydia has anything else that they wanted to.
Somebody just submitted a question.
Okay.
I have a question. These booklets you were talking about, are we going to get copies of those booklets?
Oh.
Yes, we'll be circulating them to everybody that participated in the webinar.
I'm not sure how the person got unmuted, but they were able to ask their question. We have another one that someone typed in here. I'm a little confused. I apologize. Is everyone who receives food stamps eligible for food stamps? I thought the slide said if you were denied LIHEAP, you would get that. Sorry, heat and eat.
Okay. So I'm a little confused by the question, but it sounds like there's some confusion. So everybody who is getting food stamps continues to get food stamps. Heat and Eat is a behind-the-scenes program. Okay, so we explained to you what it is, but recipients don't really have to worry about it too much. It doesn't affect how you apply for or how you apply for LIHEAP or how you apply for food stamps. It's a behind-the-scenes process that the state does in order to increase individuals' food stamps grants, which is a really wonderful thing, by giving everybody who receives food stamps a maximum utility allowance, right? Like if you get food stamps, you could submit your lease or other proof of expenses to increase your food stamps grant. They're just going to go ahead and give everyone the maximum standard utility allowance. And the way that they do that is in conjunction with the LIHEAP program by issuing these small LIHEAP grants. But it doesn't affect, this is just all happening behind the scenes. It's happened for years. It's a really good thing because it increases food stamps grants. And there is a current threat for that, which wouldn't affect LIHEAP again, it would affect food stamps. But this is something that just goes on in the background, but works in conjunction with the LIHEAP program and uses some LIHEAP dollars to effectuate. Does that answer your question?
Since everyone's muted, I hope he will respond in the chat box. In the meantime, we have another question. I heard complaints from folks who claim that they cannot get through to the LIHEAP hotline. It is always busy, especially in Philadelphia. Is there a better number to provide?
And in Philadelphia, so it depends what they need to do. I usually don't advise people using the LIHEAP hotline because it's hard to get through. The most useful thing for the LIHEAP hotline is when you already have been approved for a LIHEAP cash grant, and then you get a crisis, and you want to call and say, now I have a crisis. Usually folks I'm working with, I'll just send them into the office I don't know what happened to my screen there, I'm sorry, but I'll just send them into the local office with their shut-off notice. If they want to know the status of their LIHEAP application, a better number to call in Philadelphia would be the customer service center number to check on the status. But if they have general questions about LIHEAP, I'm not exactly sure. There are different options depending on sort of the reason they're calling the hotline. But the hotline, sometimes you can get through, and sometimes it's a really long hold time. I don't know if John has anything to add about sort of outside of Philadelphia perspective on that.
No, I think what you said is correct. And you can always call Pulp. You can give them up the Pulp utility hotline. And that should be, or one of the numbers on the last page of the slide.
That takes us into our next question. Where can I get a hard copy of the slides? Will you be making them available to people that we can email them after the fact?
Yes, Kelly, I'll provide them to you, and you can distribute them to everybody that participated.
Okay, so we will send them out after, maybe not necessarily today, but we will send them out sometime next week after the webinar. We have another question. For people who have oral leases, what is acceptable documentation that heat is included in their rent?
So the best thing would be a letter from the landlord, but that's not always possible. So, so again, the best thing would be a letter from the landlord. And sometimes you have to get creative with verification. If the client has no documentation at all, community legal services will work with the client to do an affidavit where they attest on, under penalty of perjury that to whatever it is they're testing in this situation, that there is an oral agreement with the landlord and that heat is included. But the easiest thing to do would be to do a very brief letter that you have the landlord just sign.
And this is John. I would also note that it could be a written or oral confirmation from the landlord. So if you could convince the landlord to call in, that would also work.
And DHS is actually supposed to also make collateral contacts. So if you can't get the landlord to call in, you could ask DHS to call your landlord and give them the phone number.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So I think we'll wrap up this webinar for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you to John and Lydia for presenting. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to them at the numbers and emails on the screen. And we will also get the hard copy of the PowerPoint out to you by email. We will send it. So thanks everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Kelly.